the greatest show in the galaxy, more like the greatest episode of season 25. But that's not true, because Remembrance of the Daleks is in that season as well. Okay, I won't lie. When I hear the premise of the Doctor and Ace find themselves at a deadly circus where you have to perform or die. And when I say or die, I'm going to put the clip of the God of Ragnarok saying it in, because I did like a pervert impression of that guy. I love them though. I love the gods of Ragnarok. I feel like with this story, if they're in a circus performing acts, I'd expect more of like a tournament structure. Like, oh, they go in the ring, they have to do an act, and they only just scrape by, but then they get onto the next round and the next round. But it's not really like that. They kind of spend most of the time just not even in the ring, if you know what I mean. They're just running around all over the place. But genuinely, I love this story. Greatest Show is one of the weirdest, but also greatest stories of the late 80s. So what exactly is so good about the greatest show in the galaxy? Number 1, production design. This might be one of the best looking McCoy stories. I know, obviously, we're still talking the late 80s Doctor Who here. It still kind of looks like CBBC. It's like I'm watching an episode of Raven. But you know what? This is a serial where they really made the most of what they had. And they delivered something quite spectacular. So first of all, the location work. They're filming in a quarry, but they managed to find a nice quarry to film in. There's tons of variety to the topography, or whatever the fuck whatever it's called when you got like land variation. You got these huge sand dunes which look sick. You got rocks, obviously. You got big pools and lakes. Like, obviously it doesn't look 100% like an alien planet. Like, it still kind of looks like they're just like a sandy place. You know, it's a nice, okay, like, it looks good, you know? It doesn't, we're not dealing with Destiny of the Daleks. Equally, all the props and set pieces they have out here also look just real good, you know? There's some wonderful on-location miniature work, which is then blended almost seriously with the live-action footage, holy hold. And then when you get that fucking Quantel paintbox planet just slapped back there in the background, you know, it creates a very memorable and effective image, especially for the late 80s of Doctor Who. And then there's the circus itself. And there's a funny story about this. Okay, see, so location filming for this story was finished first, and they were ready to do all the interior scenes at the studio. But, bit of bad news, it was discovered that there was a huge asbestos outbreak at the studio. I just said studio twice, therefore rendering them completely unusable. So, John Nathan Turner, determined not to let this story become another Shada, had to find some kind of solution. I mean, just how are we supposed to film these scenes set inside a tent if we can't access the studio to film the sets that are meant to look like the inside of a tent? How, Elmo, how? So they used a tent. Yeah, in a stroke of pure luck, they realized they could just erect a giant tent in a car park and film there, and that it would ironically be more convincing than filming in studio, because, well, it's an actual fucking tent. And it works! The tent stuff looks great and feels real because it is. It's a tent. I've seen them before. I went camping, Dad. Maybe my one criticism is that the ring itself is a little small, like, and you usually stick in elephants and lions, but I mean, it's understandable. Like, a production like this was always going to be somewhat limited in scale. The rest of the tent, this is where I've got no more notes, so I'm just going to have to make all this shit off. Outside of the main tent scene, which has all the seats and the ring and looks pretty great, they also have these random tent corridors, because what Doctor Who story is Doctor Who without Doctor corridors? These bits also look really cool. See, something this story did that a lot of Doctor Who didn't in the past was use lighting. Like, someone actually gave a shit. And it's great. They put all these weird colored lights all over the place, and it's so trippy. It's like I'm watching, like, low-budget bad Jell-O. It's like Jell-O. Because it's wobbly, because the wobbly stairs. Holy shit, I did it! So yeah, the rest of the tent, you know, it's looking pretty great. Also on the visual end of things, the cinematography and direction is pretty fucking spectacular. This was directed by Alan Waring, I think. Hang on, I've got the DVD, like, over here. Let me just... Oh god, I'm stepping on. So this was Alan Waring's first time directing, and from what I could see, he'd mainly done like soap operas before this. But, you know, he brings what is, I think, a far more interesting and just experimental, energetic style than had really been seen in Doctor Who for at least a while. I mean, I don't know if it's because they were filming on location, but you get more unusual angles, cases of moving camera getting closer in and with the subject, shot in more of a kind of a single camera style as opposed to the multicam flat that let's have fun with the Golden Girls and Grandma style that had been prevalent for just a lot of Doctor Who. It's really exhausting. As well, there's some like really nice lighting. Like I know I talked about the corridors earlier, but also there's like this one scene where Ace gets locked in Bellboy's robot barn or whatever the fuck that is, and it looks great. There's like this great Venetian shutter blinds and this like rim lighting, and it's all blue and shadowy and atmospheric, and it's like, wow, it actually almost looks like a movie and not like the Golden Girls Let's Have Fun with Grandma, Fisher Price Limited. Dennis Fisher, fantastic. No one knows what that means. I really appreciate the visual direction of this episode. It's funky, it's energetic, you know, it just feels like it has more of like an identity going for it, especially paired with the incredibly impressive production design set in a tent. Ooh. Moving on though, the music man. Oh, the music man. Mark Ayres. Oh, your music man. This was Mark Ayres' first official gig on Doctor Who before he then became like just the audio guy for everything ever from then on. I gotta say, I really like Mark Ayres' style, man. I feel like he has a much more cinematic approach to scoring Doctor Who than had been done in the past. He writes music specifically for scenes, and he often writes the music in a way where it's intended to actually interact with the elements in the scenes. Dude wrote over an hour of music for this, I think like an hour and 20 minutes, and it's awesome. I love the score for Greatest Show in the Galaxy. It's probably my favorite Mark Ayres score, and that's out of like the 3 that I've heard. It's incredibly atmospheric, it's weird, it's got so much variety, it ramps up in such fun, cool ways. Dude squeezes in like an acid bass line in like the final boss confrontation. Not a final boss, because it's the Gods of Ragnarok. The final music when he's fighting the Gods of Ragnarok and Mark Ayres gets that. It's fucking sick. It's so cool. It's great. I love it. Another point I'd like to make is that there are some classic Doctor Who episodes that are quiet as all hell, man. And sometimes quietness can be an incredibly effective atmospheric tool to create quietness or whatever the fuck. But other times, it's really boring and everyone sounds like they're in a quiet studio just saying shit, and I don't give a fuck. Greatest Show comes along and not only with its excellent direction, brings you a very constant, maybe too constant, soundtrack that accompanies basically every scene. And yeah, whilst honestly it is maybe a little overdone in places, I like the constant sense of atmosphere and tension it adds. I feel like I'm not expressing myself very well here. But you know what? I gotta admit, I gotta hand it to Mark Ayres. He was willing to push the boat out of this one. He set himself an impossible task. What is the maximum number of record scratches that would be acceptable to put in this rap beat? And then the dude didn't find an answer. He just kept going until the song was more record scratches than sound. And it's a fucking bop. In the galaxy, the galaxy, Okay, that's how the music goes. Number 7. That's just where we're at now. 7. I also have to acknowledge the characters for Greatest Show in the Galaxy because, it's just a great little bunch of people in here. Captain Cook, first of all, hilarious. Just this weirdo explorer, half parody of the Doctor. Dude just keeps chatting shit about, remind me of the time that I was on Galobus.
I don't care what happened on Galobus.
It's hilarious. It's great. I love it.
Yes, I know. I never mind. Absolutely. A very similar thing happened to me once, you know.
You got the Chief Clown. Dude's great. Really good performance. Ian Reddington doing it good. I'm really losing track of what I'm saying here. Mags, I like her. She's like a werewolf lady. She's played by someone called Jessica Martin, who's apparently a comedian. I don't know much about her. She transforms. I like when she says, "See for yourself!" Yeah, okay. But the final thing to comment upon would easily be the themes and the satire. So basically, Stephen Wyatt originally intended this story to be somewhat of a reflection of the, I guess, deterioration of the hippie movement. But obviously I don't care about that one because I'm a Doctor Who fan. The bit I care about is the bit where this entire story is actually a massive metaphor for the Doctor Who production team and Doctor Who as a show itself. And it's fucking brilliant! Basically, there are countless nods throughout about this being a not-so-subtle allegory for the state of Doctor Who at the time of this episode's production. First of all, you've got the fact that the once universally famous Greatest Show has become a shadow of its former self, a desperate attempt to keep satisfying an audience constantly demanding new, more exciting thrills that they just can't provide anymore, represented by that kind of nuclear family unit.
I hope he's better than the last one.
Couldn't be much worse.
One can also see the Gods of Ragnarok themselves as stand-ins for the BBC controllers, the ultimate higher power behind this.
When you no longer entertain us, you
In some ways, Captain Cook can be seen as like a sort of twisted, darker version of the Doctor's less savory aspects of that character. That was a really good sentence. Like, okay, maybe I'm getting a bit deep here, you know, hold on, this is like Who theory over here, Who theory. But like, considering that Doctor Who is like a sort of representation of British culture iconography, so he's meant to be like a distinctly British protagonist, I find it interesting how you've got Captain Cook, who is clearly dressed as this kind of colonizer British explorer who sees the universe as his playground to walk in and to claim, and how he refers to his companion Mags as a fine specimen. Maybe I shouldn't do the voice. To me, it feels like they're taking the aspects of the Doctor's characterization and looking at it through like this lens of this is the most distilled negative version of those values within a character. This doesn't make any sense. I feel that it's kind of satirizing the idea of the Doctor as an intergalactic explorer, but rather than looking at the Doctor as a savior of cultures, the Doctor was more of a twisted colonizer who saw everything as his right to claim. And similarly, his relationship with his companion is more like a weird ownership, and that he sees them more as objects. Maybe I'm getting a bit too theoretical for the greatest show in the galaxy, but that's just how I always saw Captain Cook. However, this approach to satirizing and reflecting the program itself is no more clearly seen than within the character of WizKid. That was a really hard sentence to say. So WizKid is was basically Chris Chibnall. There's a rumor that Chris Chibnall's appearance on the Pip and Jane Baker roast or whatever the fuck whatever that was. There's a theory that his appearance as a opinionated, spreckly little kid basically caused the creators to put this WizKid character in here, who I think was originally meant to be a computer hacker blob, and instead got turned into a weird tank top wearing Doctor Who fan. Either way, I think WizKid's fucking hilarious. The kinds of dialogue WizKid is getting, it's so clear what they're trying to do. The stuff when he's saying like,
although I never got to see the early days, I know it's not as good as it used to be.
Stuff like,
that was one of your finest ever gigs. Well, insofar as you can tell from the posters.
like?
And even,
I've got maps at home showing all your journeys and a piece of one of your old shoes.
it's clear what they're trying to do, and I think it's hilarious. I think it's all in good humor, and I think it's a really interesting kind of representation of potentially the creative team's relationship with the show at that point. This weird thankless task of trying to bring the show to life every week, and yet the audience and the BBC just aren't giving the love nor the support. The show's literally on its legs, on its death legs. Is that a term? On its last legs, on its last death legs. It's on its last death bed legs. It's just trying anything it can to stay afloat, but just crumbling and failing before you. And I think that's just really funny. If I had some criticisms, yeah, I got a few. Number one, most of the cliffhangers of this story are kind of weak.
Well, are we going in or aren't we?
The one that's the best is like the Mags one, and even then it's kind of offset by McCoy making a goofy face. Other criticisms include the fact that, well, this is a Stephen Wyatt story, and whilst I love that man's imagination, his world building and kind of backstory stuff always seems a bit unclear to me. It's always never quite clear exactly how long things have been going on for and when things started, and some things feel like it's implied it's been thousands of years, and other things seem like it's been literally a few days. But that stuff kind of doesn't matter, because ultimately the ride of the weird, twisted episode is part of the appeal itself. That's why I really like Greatest Show of the Galaxy. I'm going to stop this now.